I thought I had all the power. I was ready to leave, to start over, to be free. But what I didn't expect was for her to stand up and flip the entire script. My name's Ray. I'm 42 years old, and until recently, I thought I had everything figured out. I was married for 16 years, to a woman I once believed was the love of my life. We built a quiet, middle-class life together. A house in the suburbs, 2 kids, the usual rhythms of work, dinner, and bills. But somewhere along the way, the spark vanished. Conversations turned into grunts. Laughter was replaced by long silences, and I began to feel more like a roommate than a husband. I told myself it was normal, that after so many years things were supposed to settle down. But deep inside I was frustrated, lonely, and angry. I'd come home to a woman who barely looked up from her phone, who seemed exhausted every second of the day, and who never touched me unless it was out of habit. I convinced myself she had stopped caring, that maybe she wasn't even attracted to me anymore. And instead of confronting that pain, I started building a case in my head day by day that I was the victim of a loveless marriage. Then someone new came along. She was vibrant, interested, always asking how my day was going. It started small, quick conversations, friendly messages, but I could feel something shifting. She made me feel seen again, like I mattered, and the more I compared her to my wife, the more I started to believe I deserved better. I wasn't cheating, not technically, but emotionally, I was already drifting. The guilt was there, but I buried it under layers of resentment, and then came the moment I snapped. One night, after another cold dinner in silence, I exploded. I told my wife I was tired of being ignored, that there was someone else who actually wanted me. I even said I might leave. I expected her to cry, to scream, to beg me not to go. I wanted that reaction. I wanted to feel powerful, needed. But what I got instead, it wasn't anything I had prepared for. Her reaction stopped me cold, and that's where everything started to unravel. When I married Leah, she was full of life, warm, affectionate, and always the first to laugh at my dumb jokes. She used to run into my arms when I came home from work, eyes lighting up like I was the best part of her day. In those early years, we'd talk about everything, our dreams, our fears, even the silly little things like which cereal brand was the best. I honestly believed we were a team, but over the years, that warmth started to fade. At first, I thought it was just stress, the kids, her job, life piling up. But soon the excuses turned into habits, and the habits turned into walls between us. These days, Leah barely looked at me. She was always tired, always distracted, scrolling through her phone during dinner, answering emails in bed, constantly preoccupied. When I spoke, her responses were clipped or automatic. If I tried to joke, she'd either sigh or roll her eyes. Physical intimacy? Practically non-existent. It had been months since she touched me in any way that felt like love. Our once lively home had grown cold. We lived more like polite strangers than husband and wife. I'd come home from work, we'd eat dinner in silence, then disappear into separate corners of the house, me with the TV, her with her laptop. On weekends, we rarely even spoke unless it was about bills or groceries. I started feeling like a ghost in my own marriage, unseen, unwanted. And the longer it went on, the more resentment began to build. I'd find myself lying awake at night, wondering what I'd done wrong, then flipping the question entirely. What had she done wrong? I told myself I wasn't asking for much, just attention, appreciation, to feel like I mattered. But when it never came, I began to drift emotionally, slowly and quietly. That's when she entered the picture. Her name was Maya, a coworker, younger than me by a few years, but not too young to understand life's bruises. She worked down the hall from my office, and we started with casual chats by the coffee machine. But it didn't stay casual for long. She'd laugh at my jokes, ask about my weekend, notice when I got a haircut, little things Leah hadn't done in ages. One day we ended up sitting together during a company lunch, and the conversation flowed like I hadn't felt in years. Easy, fun, intoxicating. She asked about my life, my hobbies, even my marriage. I was honest, maybe too honest. Soon we started texting. At first it was about harmless things, work updates, funny memes. But then it grew deeper, personal, emotional. She'd tell me about her rough day and I'd tell her how I felt invisible at home. She listened, really listened. And before I even realized it, Maya had become the highlight of my day. Her messages gave me something to look forward to. Her voice felt like home, while my actual home felt like a prison of silence. I tried telling myself I wasn't doing anything wrong. I wasn't cheating. I was just talking to someone who understood me. But deep down I knew. I was sharing parts of myself with Maya that should have been reserved for Leah. And yet I didn't stop. I didn't want to. I started comparing them. Maya, who made me laugh, who called me charming and a handsome, who noticed the way my eyes lit up when I talked about music. Leah, who barely looked up from her screen, who hadn't complimented me in years, who made me feel like a burden in my own home. I began rewriting the story in my head. Maybe I wasn't the one who failed. Maybe I'd been patient long enough. Maybe I deserved to be happy, to feel alive again. With every message Maya sent, with every laugh she gave me, that justification grew stronger. And yet, in the background, I knew I was juggling fire near a room full of gas. I was trying to live two lives, one of routine and silence, the other of secret conversations and emotional adrenaline. It wasn't sustainable. Something was going to give. And I didn't know it then, but that quiet tension, that slow emotional erosion, it was only a matter of time before something exploded. It started with a moment I should have walked away from. Maya and I had been texting constantly, meeting for coffee breaks that stretched longer than they should, sharing more than we had any right to. But that day, everything shifted. We were alone in the parking garage after a late meeting, saying goodbye, and she reached out to fix my collar. I don't know if it was the silence, the proximity, or the weeks of pent-up tension, but our eyes met and something just snapped. I kissed her, or maybe she kissed me. It doesn't even matter now. What matters is that I didn't stop it. It wasn't just a kiss either. It was heavy, heated, full of things we hadn't said out loud. And when we finally pulled apart, reality hit me like a truck. My heart was racing, my hands were shaking, and my stomach twisted into guilt the second I got into my car. Driving home that night felt like crawling back into a lie. I kept thinking, what the hell did I just do? But the adrenaline hadn't fully worn off. Part of me felt alive again, desired, seen. The other part felt sick. I knew I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. I came home late, muttered some excuse about traffic and a last-minute client call, and went straight to the shower so she wouldn't smell Maya's perfume on me. Leah barely looked up when I walked in. No suspicion, no questions, just her usual tired silence. Somehow that made me feel worse. In the days that followed, I started pulling away even more, emotionally, physically, mentally. Every conversation felt like a chore. I avoided eye contact, picked up extra shifts, found reasons to be out, and when I was home I was irritable, short-tempered, waiting for a reason to snap. I wanted her to notice, to ask what was wrong, hell, maybe even to fight for me. But she never did. She just retreated further into herself, like she was bracing for a storm that had already started raining. Then one night, it all blew up. I came home to find the sink overflowing with dirty dishes, the kids arguing in the background, and Leah on the couch staring blankly at the TV. Something inside me snapped. I started yelling about the mess, about how she never cared anymore, about how I felt like a ghost in my own home. She didn't yell back. She just turned the volume down and looked at me, her eyes tired but sharp. "And you've been gone even when you're here," she said. "What exactly are you mad about?" That made me explode. I threw everything on the table. How cold she'd become, how invisible she made me feel, how I was sick of living like roommates. I wanted her to react, to fight, to finally show something. And then I said it. The words flew out of my mouth before I could stop them. "Maybe I should just leave you. Maybe someone else actually wants me." The moment they escaped my lips, the room went dead silent. Even the kids had stopped fighting in the background. like the air had been sucked out of the house. I expected her to break down, to scream, to cry. I braced for the emotional collapse, for the desperate plea to stay. But she didn't. Instead, she looked at me with this eerie calmness that made my skin crawl. Her voice was quiet, controlled, piercing. "If you want to leave," she said, "then leave, but don't expect me to make it easy." I stood there frozen, my mouth half open. That wasn't the script. That wasn't how this was supposed to go. She wasn't supposed to let me walk away. She was supposed to fall apart, to realize what she was losing, to need me. But she didn't even flinch. Her eyes didn't tear up. Her hands didn't shake. She just stared at me like she'd already mourned me long ago. In that moment, I realized I had misread everything. I thought I held the power. I thought I could shake her, hurt her, push her into fighting for us. But she'd already let go. Or maybe she was stronger than I ever gave her credit for. That calmness? That wasn't indifference. That was resolve. I went to bed that night not knowing whether I was staying or going, and for the first time in a long time I couldn't stop thinking about her. Not Maya, but Leah. Not because I wanted her back, but because suddenly she didn't feel like someone I had power over. She felt like someone I underestimated, someone who, in the middle of being left behind, stood up and refused to be broken. And that scared me more than anything. I packed my bags and left the house 3 days after that argument. Leah didn't try to stop me. She didn't even come to the door. She just stayed inside with that same calm, unreadable look on her face, while I threw some clothes into a duffel and walked out. I stayed at my friend Ray's place for a few nights, crashing on his lumpy couch and pretending like this was just temporary, a breather, a reset, but I knew deep down that I wasn't going back. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Eventually, I moved in with Maya. It felt like freedom at first. No more tension, no more cold silences. She welcomed me with open arms, lit candles in the bathroom, cooked my favorite meals. She told me how brave I was for standing up for myself, for choosing what made me happy. And for a while, I bought into that. It felt good to be wanted, to be needed, to be seen. We slept in late, watched movies curled up on the couch, and acted like we were in some romantic drama where everything had fallen perfectly into place. But the cracks started showing faster than I expected. Maya wasn't just affectionate, she was clingy. She needed constant reassurance, asked where I was going every time I stepped out, pouted if I didn't text back fast enough. She grew irritated when I seemed distracted, jealous if I talked to any other woman, even my sister. The warmth that once felt comforting started to suffocate me. Her place, which first felt like a sanctuary, began to feel like a trap. And then came the news I wasn't ready for. Leah had filed for divorce. No warning, no discussion. Just an envelope handed to me by a courier at Maya's door one morning. The paperwork was thick, precise, and aggressive. She'd hired a tough lawyer, the kind who doesn't miss a beat. She wasn't just asking for custody of the kids. She was making it very clear she wasn't going to be pushed around. Bank accounts were frozen. She'd taken her name off the joint credit card. I found out she had already met with a financial advisor and moved half the assets into a protected account, something her lawyer must have told her to do. It hit me then she hadn't been silent out of weakness. She'd been preparing, planning. I'd been outmaneuvered without even knowing a game had started. I tried calling her. No answer. I sent long texts, one apologetic, one angry, one desperate. Nothing. The silence from her end was louder than any shouting match we'd ever had. It wasn't cold anymore. It was final. I thought maybe I'd still have people on my side, friends, family. But slowly they started distancing themselves. My sister stopped replying to my check-ins. A few friends unfollowed me on social media. Even Ray, whose couch I had once called home, told me gently that maybe I should figure things out on my own. No one said it outright, but I could feel it. They were disappointed. They saw me not as a man who had chosen love, but as someone who abandoned his family for a fantasy. Maya noticed my mood shifting. I wasn't as present, as excited. I started working late, claiming meetings that didn't exist. I needed space, but there was none. She sensed it, and the more I pulled back, the more tightly she held on. The same warmth that once pulled me in was now smothering. Every day I found myself thinking about Leah, not the cold, distant version of her that I had resented, but the woman I'd built a life with, the partner who had held my hand through funerals, who'd slept beside me in hospital waiting rooms, who knew the difference between my angry silence and my sad one. I didn't miss the silence of our marriage, but I missed the stability, the shared understanding, the subtle glances across the dinner table that meant when the kids are being weird again. I missed the life we had built, the ordinary, imperfect, deeply rooted life. Maya could never understand that because we hadn't lived it together. With her, everything felt borrowed, like I was renting someone else's happiness and the lease was already expiring. One night I found myself back in my car, parked outside my old house, just staring at it. The porch light was on. A different car sat in the driveway, probably her friend's. The curtains were drawn. I didn't knock. I just sat there and thought about how far I drifted from that version of myself who once belonged there. I had walked away thinking I was reclaiming my life, that I'd won something. But all I had really done was abandon the people who gave my life meaning. And now, someone I once thought would be lost without me had shown me she was stronger than I ever imagined. I thought I'd win by leaving. Instead, it felt like I'd been outplayed in a game I didn't even know I was in. It all fell apart faster than I could have imagined. Maya changed. Practically overnight, the woman who once clung to me, who used to text me sweet nothings in the middle of meetings and cook me my favorite meals, started going out more, responding coldly, spending nights with friends, and leaving vague explanations in her wake. I'd ask questions and get hit with eye rolls or silence. Then one night she came home late, reeking of someone else's cologne, and casually said, "We'll need to talk." She didn't cry. She didn't explain. She just said, "Sador, you were never mine. You were just a man on the rebound. I got bored waiting for you to stop looking backward." And that was it. She left before I could say anything, packed her things the next day, and vanished from my life like I was a temporary layover on her way to something better. And then, there I was, alone. The apartment was too quiet. My savings were nearly gone, eaten up by legal fees, the cost of starting over, and trying to maintain the illusion of a new life I wasn't equipped for. There were nights I sat in the dark, staring at old photos on my phone, wondering how I let it get this far. I scrolled past a picture one day. Someone had tagged Leah in a post. She was smiling, laughing, out at some fundraiser or book club event. She looked light, free. There was a spark in her eyes I hadn't seen in years. She wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. She was glowing. I found out from our youngest, the only one who still occasionally replied to my messages, that she'd started volunteering, made new friends, joined a local art group. She laughs more now, they said with a bluntness that hit me in the chest. It's weird, but good. That's when it really sank in. Leah hadn't stopped being a loving wife. She'd just been carrying too much for too long. She didn't grow cold out of spite. She was exhausted. She'd held up our family with sheer will while I silently checked out. While I sat there stewing in my own self-pity, she was juggling the kids' appointments, bills, family events, and my mood swings. I started remembering things, the little details I used to overlook, how she always stayed up when the kids were sick, pacing the hallway with a thermometer in one hand and a worried look on her face. How she would call me at work, not to nag, but just to ask if I ate lunch. How she defended me in front of her judgmental cousins during holidays, even when I barely acknowledged her effort. Those memories hit harder than any argument ever had. I saw the love. It had been there, maybe quieter than I wanted, maybe not as flashy as what I thought I needed, but it was real, solid, unshakable, until I shook it. I tried to make amends. I called. No answer. I texted. Long, rambling messages filled with apologies, admissions, pathetic attempts to explain the unexplainable. Still nothing. I drove to the old house once. She opened the door, stared at me with unreadable eyes, and didn't say a word for what felt like a full minute. Then, calmly, she said, You don't get to break something and expect to be welcomed back like nothing happened. I tried to speak. I had so much to say. But she shut the door, gently, not in anger, just finality. I stood there on that porch, the same one where we used to watch the kids ride their bikes, where we'd sip coffee in the mornings before the world got busy, and I realized what I had really lost. Not just a wife, I lost her. The woman who had loved me when I had nothing, who built a home out of thin air, who would have gone to war for me if I had just stood beside her instead of across from her. And now, she was gone, not physically, not entirely from my life, but emotionally, spiritually, irrevocably. That version of her who believed in me, who rooted for me, who saw the best in me even when I didn't see it in myself. I'd buried that version the day I walked out, and for the first time, I saw what I really lost. Not just a marriage, not just a home, but the woman who would have done anything for me, until I gave her a reason not to. I used to think that being desired meant being loved, that attention, excitement, and passion were proof that someone cared, that if someone looked at you like you were the only person in the room, it meant they were yours, heart and soul. But now I know better. Being loved isn't about fireworks or flattering texts or a thrill that fades. It's about someone staying when things get hard. It's about someone holding on when you're not your best self. It's about quiet, patient loyalty, not noise and drama. I won't sugarcoat anything. I messed up. Deeply. I let resentment fester in silence. I blamed Leah for being tired, for being stretched thin, for not showing affection the way I thought I deserved. I told myself I was the victim, that I was justified in looking elsewhere for comfort. I started an emotional affair and convinced myself it was harmless, that it filled a void. But the truth is, I wasn't just looking for someone to desire me. I was running from the responsibility of being a real partner, and when I threatened to leave, I thought she'd break. I thought she'd beg. I thought I'd win some twisted power struggle. Instead, she found her voice and walked away with more grace and strength than I ever gave her credit for. Now, I live in a small, quiet apartment. The walls echo at night. I eat dinner alone. I keep my phone on loud, hoping for a text that never comes. From a daughter, a son, even a relative who still sees me as more than the sum of my mistakes. The woman I thought would be my escape turned out to be a detour to nowhere, and the family I once had? They're out there, living, healing, without me. There's a kind of regret that doesn't just visit you. It moves in. It sits with you at breakfast. It whispers in the dark. It reminds you not of what you lost, but who you lost, and why. I've said sorry more times than I can count, but I know now, some apologies aren't meant to be accepted, some bridges don't get rebuilt, and some people, they don't come back. So now I ask myself every day, how do you look in the mirror when the person you became destroyed the only person who ever truly loved you? And maybe the harder question is, what would you do if you still had time to choose differently? I'll leave you with that.